welcome. I'm Lucy Fisher, the Deputy Political Editor of the Daily Telegraph, and I'm joined today by Kate Ferguson, the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. We are delighted to be hosting this In Conversation with Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor. We'd like to say a huge thanks to iNHouse Communications, who are behind this event for the Conservative Party Spring Conference, and to those who've pre-submitted questions. Chancellor, we'd also like to say a huge thanks to you for sparing the time to be with us today. We know you've had a very busy year working out the unprecedented financial response to coronavirus, and we're very aware that you've spoken quite a lot about that. So today we'd like to throw ahead, looking ahead to some of the challenges and opportunities that stand before you.
Great, looking forward to it.
So, Chancellor, you've obviously had to oversee an unprecedented time where, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, you were basically shutting the economy down. But going forward, we know that Brits are sitting on a massive savings pile, and presumably your next big ambition is going to be to encourage them to go out and spend that in the high streets when they reopen. What are you looking at to incentivise Brits to go and spend that money?
Well, I think the difference this time around from last year. Last year we were worried about whether once things reopened, people would get out there and spend. There was a lot of information in polling and behavioural studies. People were very anxious, and so we weren't sure that even once things were open, that they would get back to doing all the things that they love doing, whether it's going for a meal, going shopping, seeing the friends. And that's why we were a little bit interested in trying to incentivise that behaviour last time. I think this time around, we know now, both from our experience and from looking around the world, that actually once you reopen things, it seems that people will get out there and do what they do best, which is go have fun. So I think there's probably less role really for government to encourage or incentivise that. What we need to make sure is people feel the reassurance that it is safe, and vaccines are an important part of that. And then we've got COVID protocols that have been in place as things reopen. So all of those things are there. But I think actually once things get open, I think hopefully people will head out all by themselves.
So you think the economy will just sort of bounce back in the summer when it's reopened? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic that once we get things open, you're right about the pent-up savings. Now, look, it's important when we talk about that, they're not evenly distributed, so that's in aggregate for the economy. Obviously, some people have had a really tough time, other people have been able to build up savings. But at the economy-wide level, there is a lot of excess savings, and if some of that gets spent, that would be great to help drive growth, but also just people getting back to normal. That will be very beneficial. And we ultimately are a consumption-led economy, right? We're an economy more so than most of our peers is driven by people going out and shopping and seeing their friends and having meals and going out to theatres and things. So important for us that we get back to that.
Yeah, but if I've saved quite a pretty penny in lockdown, is it my duty to go and spend that in the shops?
Oh, gosh.
Would you encourage me?
I'm not sure I should be giving personal financial advice to everyone's individual circumstances. And I think people obviously need to manage their own circumstances, but I think people will be key. What we've seen through the crisis, right? People, I think, have developed a closer attachment to their local community, both socially but also economically. I think the importance of being local, shopping local, supporting local businesses has probably grown through this crisis. And I remember I saw that early on. People knew that their businesses were having a tough time, so when things reopened, they wanted to get back and support their local high streets. And also they saw what those local shops did for them, out there doing food deliveries to people who needed help. And so I think people remember that. So I think people will feel that when they can, they will want to do their bit to go support the businesses that they love in their towns and villages.
I wanted to ask you briefly about inflation. There's a lot of concern that the Biden administration's $1.9 trillion stimulus package could fuel global inflation. This side of the Atlantic, we've obviously heard warnings from the Bank of England about the inflationary tiger being on the prowl. Just how worried about it are you?
Well, I think important, if you look at inflation expectations here in the UK, they remain actually well anchored, and you can see that in the financial markets. But I think what people are concerned about from a macroeconomic perspective is we've had both a demand and a supply shock, right? So, people are not able to spend the money, but we don't quite know what's happened to the supply capacity of our economy, how many restaurants are going to reopen, how many shops are going to reopen. And so there's a concern that actually if you have too much demand and not enough supply, then that would fuel inflation. I think, look, the reality is at the moment things look like they're okay. The numbers actually very recently this week have come out on inflation, which looks steady. I think the reason it's right for someone in my job to have an eye on it is because we have a lot of debt, a lot of borrowing that is linked to that inflation rate. and over a quarter of our debt is linked to inflation, and that's more than other countries. And so in the same way that I keep an eye on whether interest rates are moving up and down, and obviously that has inflation moving up and down has an impact on interest rates, both of those things impact the amount of money that we as a government have to spend on paying for our borrowing that we've already had. So that's why it's something that I keep an eye on, which is I talked about it at budget, and it's important that we have public finances that are on a strong path, partly so we can deal and mitigate against those kinds of risks.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about youth unemployment. So we know that unemployment is rising, although been masked somewhat by furlough, but really it's hit the under 25s hardest. Are you worried that we're going to have a generation of young people who just don't have the same job prospects that you or I had? And what are you doing about it? What can you say to them?
Yeah, look, well, you're completely right, and about who is being most impacted economically by this crisis. And I talked about this back in July, where we had the plan for jobs, and it was the first week of July, and I made exactly that point. And it was very clear that it's young people who work in industries like hospitality and retail that are most impacted by this, and young people leaving the college or university for the first time are entering a really difficult labour market. So it's been top of my mind for a long time, and that's why we created the Kickstart scheme, which is one of our signature interventions where the government is fully funding high quality jobs for 250,000 young people who are at risk of unemployment. It's so important that we help young people get that job, because if they don't get it earlier on in their career, we know how much long-term damage it can do. And to your point, I don't want this to be the generation that is scarred by coronavirus. I always said I want it to be the Kickstart generation, and that's what we hope. That and lots of other things that we've done with apprenticeships and other things will hope make a difference.
Yeah, enough companies signing up to that scheme, do you think?
Yeah.
And would you encourage more to?
I would urge. I think your company actually has. They have. I think I've been invited to come and meet your
Rishi,
Kickstarters.
you want to come and meet our Kickstarters?
Yeah, so I think Victoria spoke to me about that. So I think I'm going to try and do that.
Okay.
But I would urge companies to look at the scheme. We've had fantastic response. We've created over 100,000 jobs already from thousands of businesses in all sorts of industries, and we obviously, once we can reopen the economy, lots of those young people can fully start those jobs. They're sitting there waiting, which is great that we've been able to do that. More to come, and we've made it really easy to apply. So if you're watching and you're even a small business, we are going to fully fund the job for 6 months. That will pay the wages of the person that you get, and we'll give you £1,500 to help with the onboarding and the training costs. And then the young person's going to get matched to you through the job centres, and the work coaches are doing a great job of doing all of that. So it's a fantastic scheme. I've met tons of the Kickstarters that are on it. They're all having a brilliant time, and it's genuinely, I think, transforming people's lives.
Can I ask you about some of the structural shifts we've seen in the economy? One of the most striking is, of course, the move to work from home. And I just wondered how much you think that will become a permanent pattern, and particularly the potentially devastating effect that could have on our city centres. Will they become hollowed out to devastating effect?
So I think that the reality is nobody really knows exactly what we will go back to when we're through this. I think most people's expectation is there will be some degree of hybrid working that remains with us. So people will choose to do some working from home, not the entire time, and that's something that both employers and employees will want, and actually is going to be healthy and good. Look, I'm probably in the camp of saying that it's good that people are in offices together, because I think you can't beat the spontaneity, the team building, the culture that you create in a firm or an organisation from people actually spending physical time together. So it's important that we try and get back to a good degree of that. But look, with some extra flexibility that we've all now learned how to make life work with Zoom and Teams and everything else and remote working. So I think the challenge is even small changes will have quite significant impacts, and if it only takes people to just kind of work a day a week from home, that's quite a big impact on the tube, on commuting, on, as you said, on businesses who are used to that, and that might have an adjustment that needs to happen. But I think it's too early to know really exactly what will happen. I think, look, the key thing is now let's try and get vaccine rolled out and get back to normal, and then we'll see where things settle down. But there's many benefits that I think that has opened up our eyes. We shouldn't view it only as negative. The ability for people to work from different parts of the country and still be connected to organisations is a great thing. And actually we've talked a lot about levelling up, and I've talked about putting a new Treasury economic campus in Darlington. But that's a model that means that we can have people working in a different part of the country that are no less connected to what the work that I or other ministers are doing, because everyone can just beam into the meeting from wherever they are. So that's actually a good thing in spreading opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what you say about the value of all being together in an office and throwing ideas together. Do you think if we do see people surge back, or if there's a move to kind of encourage that would boost UK productivity?
I think it's the studies on this it's hard to say, because it's been mixed actually. Because we've been following at the Treasury, there's been a succession of studies that people have done to try and get at, is there a clear productivity advantage, disadvantage from different working models? I haven't yet seen if there is something out there. Someone please send it to me. There's actually a British economist who's at Stanford, where I used to be, called Nick Bloom, who spent a bit of time looking at this, and others. And it's not obvious that there is a clear answer one way or another. I just think intuitively, and the ability to be together is important, because you can't, the meetings that happen by chance, the people just riffing off each other, sitting, grabbing a sandwich, those things I think are important. And also think about bringing new people into an organisation. And we talked about young people.
Yeah.
Imagine you've just left college or university, you start this job in a big company, and you're sitting at home on your own. How do you get to know your peers? How do you learn the culture of an organisation? How do you get those mentors, which are important for your career development? It feels to me you don't need a study to tell you that kind of need to be in the office to get all of those goodies.
I was wondering your views on that, because you've started to see the first companies say, we're going to close our offices altogether, right, and just move wholesale to home working. And I wondered if you had a view about the bosses or companies need to actually provide a workplace for their staff. Is it moral for them to just shut up shop and say, do it over your kitchen table in a house share?
Yeah, I mean, look, every company's going to make a decision that works for them and their employees. And ultimately, I mean, if that's something that people value, and I think it probably is for some people will value that, that obviously they'll vote with their feet, right? If companies, there's a competitive market out there to hire great talent, I think companies should be focused on saying, well, look, how do we attract really great people to come and work for us? What they probably want is both, right? They want the ability to interact with colleagues in an office or whatever it might be, but also look, that flexibility we've all realised can be valuable, and so can we provide that as well where it makes sense? And it won't make sense everywhere, but where it can be provided, it's probably worth looking at.
Can we move to talking about the vaccine
Yes.
row that has beset the nation? What's your reaction to the EU's threat of a vaccine ban? And do you think that, if they do press ahead with some of the plans they've threatened, that the UK will be forced to retaliate with tit-for-tat measures?
Well, the Prime Minister's been having lots of conversations with various different people in Europe, and I think those conversations have been constructive, productive, and as he said, he's been reassured by that. I think just recently we had a joint statement put out from the UK and the EU, which shows that there is a constructive dialogue going on, and that's the right way to be. I think we're all facing the same challenges. We've all got the same virus that we're trying to grapple with, and we all believe fundamentally in free trade and open borders are a good thing. And I think we'll work through this together, and that's what the recent announcements show.
You've been very diplomatic there, but we have heard some fiery language coming out of France, Germany, and just the EU generally. Do you think they need to dial down the rhetoric?
Well, I think the statement that's just been jointly issued by the UK and the EU, I think, is helpful, and it's actually much more, and it's us, saying things together that everyone can agree with. But it's a difficult time, right? Everyone is dealing with difficult things, and so that's that. I think it's important for us to always just remain calm, to just crack on and do what we need to do, which is deliver on our commitments to get everyone vaccinated on the timetable that we've set out, and that's what we're doing. And brilliant that it's going well, and thank you to everyone who's making that a reality.
You're still confident we're going to hit that timetable?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that all the latest advice and numbers that we have show that we're still on track, and importantly, the groups, the JCVI 1 to 9 groups, groups 1 to 9, all being done by the middle of April is critical. That those groups of people, the over 50s, account for almost 100%, about 98% of all the people who have sadly passed away from coronavirus. Age is a pretty significant driver of risk, and so that being able to get that cohort vaccinated, and then with the second dose We're going to do lots of those in the next month. That's really critical.
I know when my mum and dad got their vaccine, it was quite like an exciting moment in the family anyway. Like everyone's looking forward to having theirs. I'm a bit gutted that mine might be a bit delayed now, but it's a big moment.
The benefit of youth. So there you go. No, it's been great. I mean, my dad's a GP, or retired GP. My mum's a now retired pharmacist, and so but he's gone back, and my dad's got one of these people who have gone back, and he's jabbing away. And he's loving it.
Oh, great! That's so good. Yes, everyone wanted the retired army of retired.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's gone back and he's enjoyed it. But he was saying that the vibe and the mood and the camaraderie amongst the people that he's working with and volunteering with is fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're all involved in something really special. And I've seen it when I've been out visiting centres, and I say to the people there, I mean, I think they'll remember that for the rest of their lives, that they were part of this amazing effort, and I've met lots of people like him who have come back to help out, and it's great.
Great. Can I ask you, some of the way that some of the loan schemes have been designed have come in for criticism recently. How concerned are you about major corporate defaults in the coming months, and what do you say to people who have some sort of issue with the way that some of the schemes were designed?
Well, there's some who think they're not generous enough, and there are some who think they're too generous. So I don't know which one you're talking about. But I think so. What are the things that I'm worried about, or things I'm concerned about? I think corporate debt indebtedness coming into the crisis was at relatively low levels historically. We've seen a lot of deleveraging since the last crisis, so we came into this in quite good shape in kind of corporate UK. And what you've seen actually, even though some sectors have seen an increase in indebtedness over the course of last year, the ones that you would imagine. In aggregate, you've seen deposits, so corporate, in the same way we talked about the excess savings that households have, there's a similar phenomenon occurring in the business world as well. And again, it's skewed, right? So there's some sectors where that's not the case. But in aggregate, business deposits have risen quite significantly over the year, excess deposits as well, over £100 billion worth. So that's the kind of aggregate picture. So that would say that's actually we're in reasonably healthy shape. Cash flow is a concern to me, and which is why on our kind of the most well-used scheme, which is the bounce back loans, so about over 1.3 million businesses have taken a loan of, on average, of about £30,000, and that comes with a full government guarantee. We've worked with the banks to put in place something called pay as you grow, which means very automatically and easily for those businesses, they can extend those generous, currently they're 6-year loans, they can extend them automatically to 10-year loans, and that will significantly cut the monthly payment and help with their cash flow. They can also use 6-month payment holidays or interest-only periods, again, all helping their cash flow. None of that will impact their credit record, and the low rate that those loans are currently priced at, 2.5%, will be there for the full 10-year term. So that, I think, is a generous and comprehensive and hopefully accessible way for those small businesses to save extra cash flow, even as they come out of this, and minimise the burden of repaying those loans.
I just wanted to pick you up on something there. So you're saying, just to see if I'm getting you right, are you saying that businesses, or lots of businesses, are sitting on a sort of savings pile as well? They've deposited lots of. So are you hoping they're going to go on a hiring spree, an investment spree?
Well, hopefully an investment. I think what we're going to talk about, an investment-led recovery, is important. I think, as we talk about, I think the consumption side of it, I think hopefully will largely take care of itself. I think on investment, we know that there's this excess cash, and the Bank of England estimate over £100 billion. So it's slightly hard. We don't have as granular information, but order of magnitude. And we also know business investment has been really hammered over the last year. It's gone down 20% over the course of last year. And we know that in business investment in the UK has actually been low for quite a while relative to our competitors, which is why we announced the super deduction.
Super deduction, yeah.
So that's exactly what that is designed to do. So it's meant to make investing in stuff, kit, new plant, manufacturing equipment, factories, etc. It's meant to make investing in all of that stuff super, super attractive. It's a massive business tax cut with a great name that even if people don't quite understand how it works, they know that it is something good. And it's to try and unlock some of that money and say, look, now's the time, guys. Don't sit on your hands. If you've got the cash, invest it now, because we want you to do it now and help drive our recovery. And they'll create jobs in the process. But that's why in the super deduction is timed particularly to try and unlock some of that cash.
Okay, right. I was trying to work out that super deduction budget day, it was quite complicated.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. You just need to know that it's super,
It's just
you know, and it
yeah.
you know, it reduces your
Deducts,
taxes.
yeah.
Exactly. So it's good. Yeah.
To go back to budget, some of the finest economists in the country have picked you up on your spending plans, haven't they? So they've said they don't think that you have squirreled away enough money for departmental spending in the years ahead. So they're saying that non-protective departments, so things like local government, that's the one that springs to mind, will see big cuts unless you either raise taxes to fund the black hole. So either raise taxes and fund them properly, or you're going to have to take the axe to them. What do you say to that? Is that right? You sure you got your sums right?
Yeah.
Or
So I mean, I try.
can
Let
you
me
promise us we're not going to get any more tax
Yeah,
hikes?
so what on public spending? So when this government, or when the Prime Minister started, and before I had this job, roughly we were spending just over £400 billion on what we call day-to-day spending on public services, but also on capital and investment. Now, by the end of this Parliament, what those budget forecasts show is that will have grown to over £500 billion. So it's a huge increase of £100 billion in cash that we'll be spending on all these day-to-day things. And we've already announced a lot of that increase already on all the different things that are going on, with more nurses, more police officers, more hospitals, more money in R&D and flood defence, anyway, you name it. So that's, and if you look at that spending growth over the course of a Parliament, it's pretty healthy. It's very strong spending growth.
But isn't
in
the issue
comparison.
that that's in certain areas? So obviously you've got big increases in health spending, big increases in defence, but in
There's different ways that people cut the numbers, but in aggregate, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the case. And I guess remember, we always have to prioritise, right? I mean, all governments have to prioritise. So even though we've got a big pie that is growing a lot, and growing faster than our economy is growing, because we really are making good on our promise to deliver strong public services for the British people. Within that, of course, we have priorities. So yes, you will see within that outsized growth of spending on the NHS and on schools, because those are some of the things we care most about, and policing and getting our 20,000 police officers. So, those are our priorities, those are the things we campaigned on, and I think those are the priorities of the British people as well, and I think everyone realises you've got to prioritise even within a pie that is growing.
I understand that, but they are our priorities, I think you're right, health, education, but I think people also want to know, are we in line for more tax rises? So you've got the tax triple lock in the manifesto. Is that still policy? Are you sticking to that for the full Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever, and you'll forgive me, I have the same stock answer when anyone asks me a question about tax, which I don't comment on any future tax policy. But I did talk about that at budget, and so that was important to me. I wanted to keep taxes on working people as low as possible. And as we thought about what was the best way to address this problem in our public finances, how can we do it in a fair way? Where we settled was freezing thresholds, which is a progressive measure where you don't have anyone losing any cash that they currently have as a result of that policy, and it builds over time, and also an increase in corporation tax for the largest, most successful businesses in 2 years. That seemed to me a fair way to try and solve the problem that we have.
You've detailed, huge public spending. We also know as a result of your budget, the tax burden is going to be the highest level it's been since the 1960s. High spending, high taxes. What do you say to people who would say that should be a Labour Chancellor's agenda, not a Conservative Chancellor?
Well, I think we were elected to do a bunch of things, right? We were elected to deliver strong public services, and people can remember, I hope, the 50,000 nurses and the 20,000 police officers and the 40 new hospitals. And also, the Prime Minister talked a lot about levelling up opportunity across this country by investing in infrastructure and in innovation and skills. And we've got big ambitions to deliver on all of those things, and we don't want to let people down. And you saw at the budget us getting on and doing all of that, things like whether it's investments in people's towns, new free ports, whatever it might be, and the spending review before that, talk about investment in public services. But that's what people elected us to do, and that's what we want to deliver. And it's given the situation that we faced with coronavirus, unfortunately, we had to do some things to correct the problem in public finances and repair some of that damage, which is why I had to do these difficult things on tax. But it's important ultimately that we pay our way in the world. I think people realise that, and given all the choices ahead of me, that seemed to me the best way to approach it. But look, over time, I want to keep the tax burden on working people low, which is why we we stuck to the pledge in the manifestos. We haven't changed the rates of income tax or VAT or national insurance. We froze fuel duty and froze alcohol duty.
Good, that's what we wanted
yes,
here.
exactly. There you go. Well done again for the 10th year.
No one's ever putting that up, are they, Rishi?
No, well,
Oh,
I don't comment on future tax policy, but no. So look, that's those things matter. That's the 10th year or 11th year of fuel duty freezes. Second year in a row that we have frozen all alcohol duties. So that's us trying to keep the cost of living down as well.
But the tax burden is still at the highest level since the 60s. Are you going to try and cut tax levels before the next election?
Again, it's hard to speculate about the future with any precision at the moment. I mean, there's so much economic uncertainty, and whether it's the Bank of England or the Office for Budget Responsibility, anyone would tell you that this is an exceptionally difficult time to understand exactly the trajectory of the economy as we come out of this. So I think it would be brave of anyone to think that they really can forecast perfectly, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
You're Red Rishi, aren't you? Taxes up, state big. What's Keir going to do? How's he going to win his voters back?
Well, I mean, our job is to deliver for people, and if I think about it, I have a northern constituency, and I'm a northern chancellor, and my, what I see when I'm out and about and I'm campaigning in places across County Durham and the Tees Valley, or new constituencies that we won for the first time or first time in a long time, that informs my politics, it informs me doing this job, and all those people's doors I knocked on who voted for us for the first time and trusted us to deliver for them, and also though they trusted us to look after the nation's finances. It's their money. It's not my money. It's it's your money. It's everyone's watching money, and so they know that sometimes I have to make some difficult decisions to do that. But they also know that we're getting on and delivering for them, and hopefully that's something that they will respect.
So maybe not Red Rishi, but Red Wall Rishi.
There we go.
Rishi,
That's better. That's all. We call it the blue wall now. Anyway, right? So yeah.
Can I ask you a question submitted by an audience member?
Yes.
Who asks, 6 months ago, the Treasury launched a review of alcohol taxation. The Chief Medical Officer's guidelines do not discriminate between alcohol categories. So why does the tax system, with consumers paying more in tax on whiskey than wine, and of course more on wine than beer? When will you set out a timetable for implementing reform to make it fairer?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. We haven't got to it yet, and for that I apologise, because it is something we are keen to do. So I've started doing some work on it with my colleagues. We just had a day earlier this week where we published our various sets of tax consultations and policy papers, and one of them was on air passenger duty, which is another thing we committed to getting on to do. So we're starting on that, and we do need to get to alcohol duty, which I plan to get onto. And apologies, we haven't been able to do it yet.
So following up for this viewer by the end of the year?
I would hope so. So, but we are keen to do it. We've started some work on it, and it's something that we said we would like to do. So. Happy to get his suggestions.
Where do you stand on this debate about the wine tax? So I understand that tax on beer far lower than tax on wine, and some people say that's sexist, don't they? They say it's a pink tax.
Yeah,
probably a bit of an old-fashioned phrase, but nonetheless.
So it's quite complicated. We should probably, this is kind of one for the tax aficionados, but the way we tax alcohol is quite inconsistent between different. I think that's probably I think it was the gentleman's question. We tax some things by the strength, other things by the volume, and it's a slightly inconsistent tax system. Other countries do things in a slightly different way, in a slightly more consistent way. So that's what many people have said. You could take a kind of treat everyone the same. Now, depending on where you are currently, you might have different views about whether you agree with that or not. But that is I think what you're saying is, yes, there are taxes that different bits of alcohol are treated in different ways.
But you don't think it's necessarily sexist?
I probably don't have the specific breakdown by alcohol category, by gender, so I couldn't quite tell you. It's definitely not deliberately, if that's the case. So.
Can I ask another gender question while we're on the subject, which is, I'm sure you're aware of the Telegraph's Women Mean Business campaign, which has really supported female entrepreneurs and business women.
It's been great, yes.
Glad to hear you're a keen endorser. We saw the great news last month that the number of women on FTSE 350 boards has jumped 50% in the last 5 years. I wanted to ask you, what more have you got in the pipeline to help female businesswomen? And what's the next milestone we should aim for, and by when? We've seen a third of women on FTSE 300 boards are now women of those positions. What's the next milestone?
Gosh, that's a great. I don't have a specific figure for you, but that's right. We should think about that. What is the next step? I mean, look, it's a great campaign, and it's actually right to highlight it, right? I mean, my mother is a small businesswoman, right? She ran her own pharmacy at some point, so I think it's important. And I have 2 girls, so this is something that's important to me in particular. Now, we actually, funny enough, we have a Women in Finance charter at the Treasury that my colleague John Glenn has just last week we published the next round of it, and we've got new people who are coming on board, and it's making enormous progress as it's set out, and it's set out for all the signatories a path and people holding people to account. And not everyone is where they want to be yet, but we have a transparent, collaborative process of everyone working together to kind of improve their situation. And it's not just about women on boards, but it's about pay, it's about lots of other things as well. So I'm wholeheartedly behind it. A couple of things that I've been struck by in this pandemic are, one, women disproportionately are dealing with difficulties around kids, school, childcare, career, and I think I don't have an answer, but I think we should just be cognizant of that and think about it and make sure that it forms part of our thinking as we come out of this. So that's, I think, one thing that's on my mind. I think the other thing is I'm really passionate about science and innovation, and I've been met so many fantastic women leaders over the course of this pandemic, and just trying to get more girls into STEM subjects and technology is something that I think we need to focus more on. And I've been speaking to lots of inspiring young and experienced women in that industry about what are some of the barriers and what do we need to work on with them to do that. And actually, what you find is there are some barriers at an older age, but actually it's getting really young girls turned on to doing this stuff when they're young, when they're actually probably quite young at school, and it shows that unless you can and get them excited about science at probably before they're 12, then you've lost them. And so actually the kind of interventions you need to do are quite different. It's like after school science clubs or things like whatever it might be, and doing that in a way that's appealing to girls at that age. So I think we've got some stuff to do there, and it's something that my wife and I actually have spent some time trying to do things like that when we were living in the States. And I look around, you see Sarah Gilbert being a great example, who's created this vaccine. I did one of these with her actually on Zoom, and what an inspiring person. I'm so excited to talk to my 2 girls about her as a role model, and there are lots of others like her as well.
Rishi, another audience question here. Just looking back at the past year, we've just had the first anniversary of lockdown. It's been a really grim and challenging year, obviously, for the whole country and world. What's been your most challenging moment in it, do you think?
Oh gosh, so many to pick from. Those first few weeks were really, well, I've said this before, but I mean, I genuinely thought when the Prime Minister gave me the job, and then the reality of what had happened kind of hit me, I genuinely thought the hardest thing I would ever have to do professionally in my life was put together a budget and for it to go well in 3.5 weeks, which is, I think, about the amount of time I had. And I thought, crikey, if I just get this done, this will be my Everest for life, if I can get a budget done in 3 weeks. So we got that done. And it turned out that was basically the easiest thing I had to do for a year. And it was the 4 weeks, I think, or 3 weeks right after that, when I think I was doing one of these press conferences. It felt like every other day, or certainly there were a lot. And each one of them was important because we were trying to do some really important things. Given what was going on, that was an incredibly stressful time, and just with the team absolutely amazing at the Treasury and HMRC and all my team, for us to be able to work and come up with these things and then make sure that they worked and help people. And this, because the thing I was most worried about, and I'm still most worried about, is, and we talked about it, is people losing their jobs. Now, I believe passionately in the importance of work and jobs, and so the furlough scheme and getting that done, and just knowing that would work and provide relief to people. And I still have people who come up to me and talk to me about, when you announced that, we were able to breathe, and we didn't have to let people go, and it worked. And so getting sure that worked was probably the most stressful thing.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Which is about your love of expensive gadgets, your Peloton bike, your self-heating mug. They've drawn a lot of headlines. And I would say, I think some people find it refreshing that, unlike other politicians, you don't try and hide the fact that you are very wealthy. I want to ask you, is that a conscious decision? And do you ever worry that you're out of step with the struggles of the everyman in Britain?
Yeah, so I think it was at one of these events where I was first inadvertently mentioned the Peloton thing. So the mug was a gift from my wife. Just to be clear, but it's very handy. So my general sense is that's who I am, and I try and exercise because exercise is important to me, and that's a way to do it in lockdown that made sense. And giving up gym memberships and doing that was in one sense what probably a lot of people have done actually, is find different ways to exercise and keep fit. I'm probably not super gadget heavy, but on your broader question, look, I am who I am, but remember, I think back where I came from is probably the thing I'd point people to. Now, my grandparents didn't grow up here. They moved here. They came to this country from sort of different. Certainly, my grandparents from very different circumstances, growing up elsewhere, and they brought up their kids in a way, and then my parents sacrificed an enormous amount to give me, this amazing life, and education was a thing that was really important to them, and that was a priority they put in working hard and getting on that way. And that's how I was brought up. So, obviously, they made lots of sacrifices, and I saw that. And those are the values that they left me with that, hopefully I still have with me. And I've been really fortunate to love professionally doing something that also means if you're good at it, you earn good money. I don't think that's something to be embarrassed about. I think that's something we should celebrate for everyone. I think we want people to fulfill their potential, and if people are successful in life and they've worked hard and achieved it, that's a good thing. I think we should celebrate that. And what our job is, though, is to make sure as many people as possible have access to all those opportunities, and as much as we can possible give everyone the shot at doing what they want to do. And to me, that is about education and skills, and that enables you to go and get the job that you want to do, and then hopefully be successful in life and build a family around it. That's great. So.
I think this is our last question,
right?
Because I couldn't ask it any earlier. But Rishi, you're known to everybody as Dishy Rishi. So how does that feel?
Oh no, not this.
You get asked this all the time.
No, I don't. No. Every time is too many times. No, you know what? It's. I guess it's both. Lovely and flattering. Thank you to whoever coined it, I guess. And my wife remains ever puzzled by the whole thing, is all I can say.
Do you think there's any envy among the fellow cabinet ministers?
I'm sure not.
I'm sure not.
They're a good-looking bunch, this cabinet, right? So there we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank the Chancellor for his time today. A lot to think about there. Thank you so much to Lucy for joining us. And thank you so much at home for watching.